Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer, often called Baal Shem Tov or Besht, was a Jewish mystical rabbi. He is considered to be the founder of Hasidic Judaism. The Besht is better known to many religious Jews as the Holy Baal Shem, or most commonly, the Baal Shem Tov. The title Baal Shem Tov is usually translated into English as Master of the Good Name, but at least two other translations are possible. Good Master of the Name of taking Baal Shem as a unit, meaning one who owns the holy name, therefore has the power or uses divine names to cure illnesses and perform miracles, i.e., an effective Baal Shem, one who has a good reputation in the community, since in Hebrew idiom, Baal can mean one characterized by, and Shem can mean reputation, thus one characterized by a good reputation. The name Besht, the acronym from the words comprising that name of Bet Ayin Shin Tet, is typically used in print rather than speech. The appellation, Baal Shem, was not unique to Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer, however, it is Rabbi Yisrael ben Eliezer who is most closely identified as the Baal Shem Tov, as he was the founder of the spiritual movement of Hasidic Judaism. The little biographical information that is known about Besht is so interwoven with legends of miracles that in many cases it is hard to arrive at the historical facts. The attitude of the Chassidim themselves towards these legends is an unusual blend of suspicion on one hand, and belief on the other. The Rebbe Shlomo of Rodomsk pithily declared, "Whoever believes all the miracle stories about the Baal Shem Tov in Shivhai HaBaal Shem Tov is a fool, but whoever denies that he could have done them is an apikoros, a heretic." Similarly, the Rebbe Mordecai of Neshkiz explains, even if a story about him never actually occurred, and there was no such miracle, it was in the power of the Baal Shem Tov, may his memory be a blessing for the life of the world to come, to perform everything. Nevertheless, from the numerous legends connected with his birth it appears that his parents were poor, upright, and pious. When he was orphaned, his community cared for him. At school, he distinguished himself only by his frequent disappearances, being always found in the lonely woods surrounding the place, rapturously enjoying the beauties of nature. Many of his disciples believed that he came from the Davidic line, tracing its lineage to the royal house of King David, and by extension with the institution of the Jewish Messiah. Early life and marriage. Yisrael was born to poor and not very young parents Eliezer and Sarah in a settlement near Okopy-Trodzai, a newly built fortress close to Kamieniec in the West Ukraine, where Zbruch connects with Dniester. The fortress was built as the new border post between the crown of the Kingdom of Poland and the Ottoman Empire. Located in the historic land of Podolia, most of the territory at that time was part of the Ottoman Empire for a short period. Today, Okopy is a village located in the Borshiv Raion of the Ternopil Oblast. He died in Medzhybizh, which was part of Poland and today is situated in the Khmelnytsky Oblast. At the age of 3, the Besht father gave his son his last words before passing on. They were, "Fear absolutely no one or no thing but God, and love every single Jew no matter who she is and no matter what she is doing." In 1703, Israel became an orphan, and the Jewish community of Ataluster adopted him, providing him with his basic needs. Often, after the conclusion of his studies at the local cheder, he would wander into the fields and forests that surrounded the village to meditate and recognize the wonders of God's creation. In 1710, he finished cheder and became an assistant to a Melamed. According to Hasidic legend, on his 16th birthday, Elijah the prophet appeared to him and described to him the great effects the prayers of simple folk had in heaven. Sometime in 1712, Israel became a shamish of the local synagogue. He was periodically hired as a teacher's assistant in the cheders of the small villages through which they passed. He would later relate that he took great pleasure in accompanying the children to and from school, using this opportunity to recite prayers with them and tell them Torah stories. the children's innocence and the purity with which they prayed, the Baal Shem Tov explained, caused the Almighty great satisfaction. The Mezrach Majid, the Baal Shem Tov's successor, would later say, "If only we kissed a Torah scroll with the same love that my master, the Baal Shem Tov, kissed the children when he took them to Cheddar as a teacher's assistant." According to Hasidic legend, the Baal Shem Tov would have visions in which the prophet Achiyah Hashilani would appear to him. In 1716 the Baal Shem Tov married, but soon his wife died and he went on traveling throughout the eastern Galicia. After serving for a long time as helper in various small communities of the West Ukraine, he settled as a Melamed at Tluster. The Besht was introduced to the secrets of Kabbalah by Rabbi Adam Baal Shem of Ropchissa, who was a disciple of Rabbi Yoel Baal Shem of Zamisk, the successor of Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem of Worms. The Besht became the leader of this movement at the age of 18. Caring for the Jewish poor, the group of Tzaddikim encouraged Jews to move to agrarian lifestyles as alternatives to the chronic poverty which was the lot of city Jews. In continuation of this policy, they decided that they needed to look after the educational needs of the children living in small farm communities. If a suitable teacher could not be sourced, they themselves would do so until an alternative arrangement emerged. As such, and in keeping with Jewish doctrine, the letter-bearer should fulfill its contents. The Baal Shem Tov became a teacher's assistant, and, with unconditional love, he tried to instill in these children honor for their parents and a love of God and fellow beings. He later commented, "The most joyous time in my life was teaching the small children how to say Modoroni, Shema Yisrael and Kametz Alafah." Due to his recognized honesty and his knowledge of human nature, he was chosen to act as arbitrator and mediator for people conducting suits against each other, and his services were brought into frequent requisition because the Jews had their own civil courts in Poland. In this avocation, he succeeded in making so deep an impression upon the rich and learned Ephraim of Brody that the latter promised the Besht his daughter Channa in marriage. The man died, however, without telling his daughter of her betrothal, but when she heard of her father's wishes, she did not hesitate to comply with them. The courtship was characteristic. In the shabby clothes of a peasant, he presented himself at Brody before Avraham Gershon of Kitov, brother of the girl, head of a rabbinical court in Brody, and a recognized authority in the Kabbalah and the Talmud. Avraham Gershon was about to give him alms, when the Besht produced a letter from his pocket, showing that he was the designated bridegroom. Avraham Gershon tried in vain to dissuade his sister Channa from shaming their family by marrying him, but she regarded her father's will alone as authoritative. After his marriage, Israel ben Eliezer did not remain long with his brother-in-law, who was ashamed of him, and he went to a village in the Carpathians between Brody and Kassawa. His earthly possessions consisted of a horse given to him by his brother-in-law. Israel ben Eliezer worked as a laborer, digging clay and lime, which his wife delivered every week by the wagon load to the surrounding villages, and from this they derived their entire support. The magnificent scenery in this, the finest region of the Carpathians, and the possibility of enjoying it without the interruptions of city life, compensated him for his great privations. Israel ben Eliezer and Channa had 2 children, Udl and Zvi Hirsch. Development as leader and challenges. The Besht bettered his condition when he took a position as a ritual butcher in Kashilavissa, near Ioslavissa. He soon gave up to this position in order to conduct a village tavern that his brother-in-law bought for him. During the many years that he lived in the woods and came into contact with the peasants, Israel ben Eliezer had learned how to use plants for healing purposes and to effect wonderful cures. In fact, his first appearance in public was that of an ordinary Baal Shem. He wrote amulets and prescribed cures. After many trips in Podolia and Volhynia as a Baal Shem Besht, considering his following large enough and his authority established, decided to expound his teachings in the shtetl of Medjay, and people, mostly from the spiritual elite, came to listen to him. Medjay became the seat of the movement and of the Medjay Hasidic dynasty. His following gradually increased, and with it the dislike, not to say hostility, of the Talmudists. Nevertheless, Besht was supported at the beginning of his career by two prominent Talmudists, the brothers Meir and Isaac Dov Margalios. Later he won over great and universally recognized rabbinic authorities who became his disciples and attested to both his scholarship and saintliness. These include Rabbi Meir Margolius, chief rabbi of Lemberg and later Ostrihar, and author of Mir Netivim and other works, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef HaKohen, Rabbi of Polnoy, Rabbi David Halperin, Rabbi of Ostrihar, Rabbi Israel of Satanov, author of Tiferet Yisrael, Rabbi Yosef Heilprin of Slosovitz, and Rabbi Dovber of Mezrich, to whose great authority as a Talmudist it was chiefly due that Besht doctrines were introduced into learned circles. Noteworthy is that the renowned Sephardic Rabbi Chaim Dovid Azulai cites the Baal Shem Tov in his works in great laudatory terms. Some direct historical evidence remains of the Besht during the days he lived in Medjay. Rosman discovered numerous legal documents that shed light on this period from the Polish Czartoryski noble family archives. The Besht house is mentioned on several tax registers and his house is given tax-free status, thus indicating that he was well known to the Polish magnate as an important town resource. Several of the Besht colleagues in his stories from Shivhai HaBesht also appear in Polish court records, notably Z.E.V. Wolf Kitzes and Dovid Perks. Rosman contends that the Polish documents show the Besht and his followers were not outcasts or pariahs, but rather a respected part of the mainstream Jewish communal life. Medjay at the time was not some backwater village, but a thriving, prosperous, and important community in the Czartoryski estate. Other direct evidence includes the Besht daily prayer book with his handwritten personal notes in the margins. His grave can be seen today in the old Jewish cemetery in Medjay. Over the past few years, the Aguda Zohar Tzadikim organization has restored many graves of Tzadikim in Ukraine, including Baal Shem Tov's. A new guest house and synagogue has been built next to the Earl of Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov's synagogue in the village proper has been painstakingly restored. Both synagogues are used by the many visitors from all over the world who come to pray near the Baal Shem Tov's grave. Baal Shem Tov's shul reconstructed, August 4, 2008. Earl of Baal Shem Tov, August 4, 2008. New guest house and synagogue next to Earl of Baal Shem Tov, August 4, 2008. Disputes with the Frankists and death. While the Besht lived, very little antagonism occurred between different styles of Judaism. In fact, the Besht considered himself and his disciples as mainstream. The Besht took sides with the Talmudists in a dispute against the Frankists after the mass conversion of the Frankists. The Baal Shem Tov allegedly said, "As long as a diseased limb is connected with the body, there is hope that it may be saved, but, once amputated, it is gone, and there is no hope." The upheaval caused by the threats of the Frankist movement to destroy mainstream Judaism seemed to undermine the Baal Shem Tov's health, however, and he died shortly after the conversion of many Frankists to Christianity. His legacy. Israel ben Eliezer left no books, for the Kabbalistic commentary on Ps. CVII, ascribed to him, Sefer Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, may not be genuine. In order to get at his teachings, it is therefore necessary to turn to his utterances as given in the works of his disciples Hasidim. Most are found in the works of Rabbi Jacob Joseph of Polnoy. But since Hasidism, immediately after the death of its founder, was divided into various parties, each claiming for itself the authority of Besht, The utmost of caution is necessary in judging as to the authenticity of utterances ascribed to Besht. Chapin and Weinstock contend that the Besht was essentially the right person, in the right place, at the right time. 18th century Podolia was an ideal place to foster a sea change in Jewish thinking. It had been depopulated one generation earlier due to the Khmelnytsky massacres. A Turkish occupation of Podolia occurred within the Besht lifetime, and along with it the influence within this frontier territory of Sabbatai Zevi, and his latter-day spiritual descendants such as Malik and Jacob Frank. Once the Polish magnates regained control from the Turks, Podolia essentially went through an economic boom. The magnates were benevolent to the economic benefits the Jews provided and encouraged Jewish resettlement to help protect the frontier from future invasions. Thus, the Jewish community itself was essentially starting over. Within this context, the Jews of Podolia were open to new ideas. The Besht refreshing new approaches to Judaism were welcome, expanding with little resistance in a community hungry for change. Elements of Besht's doctrines. The foundation stone of Hasidism as laid by Besht is a strongly marked panentheistic conception of God. He declared the whole universe, mind and matter, to be a manifestation of the divine being, that this manifestation is not an emanation from God, as is the conception of the Kabbalah by Mitnagdim, for nothing can be separated from God. All things are rather forms in which God reveals himself. When man speaks, said Besht, he should remember that his speech is an element of life, and that life itself is a manifestation of God. Even evil exists in God. This seeming contradiction is explained on the ground that evil is not bad in itself, but only in its relation to man. It is wrong to look with desire upon a woman, but it is divine to admire her beauty. It is wrong only insofar as man does not regard beauty as a manifestation of God, but misconceives it, and thinks of it in reference to himself. Nevertheless, sin is nothing positive, but is identical with the imperfections of human deeds and thought. Whoever does not believe that God resides in all things, but separates God and them in his thoughts, has not the right conception of God. It is equally fallacious to think of a creation in time. Creation, that is, God's activity, has no end. God is ever active in the changes of nature. In fact, it is in these changes that God's continuous creativeness consists. This panentheism would have been ignored, had Besht not been a man of the people. He gave his metaphysical conception of God an eminently practical significance. The first result of his principles was a remarkable optimism. Since God is immanent in all things must possess something good in which God manifests himself as the source of good. For this reason, the Besht taught, every man must be considered good, and his sins must be explained, not condemned. One of his favorite sayings was that no man has sunk too low to be able to raise himself to God. Naturally, then, it was his chief endeavor to convince sinners that God stood as near to them as to the righteous, and that their misdeeds were chiefly the consequences of their folly. Another important result of his doctrines, which was of great practical importance, was his denial that asceticism is pleasing to God. Whoever maintains that this life is worthless is in error. It is worth a great deal, only one must know how to use it properly. From the very beginning, Besht fought against that contempt for the world which, through the influence of Isaac Luria's Kabbalah, had almost become a dogma among the Jews. He considered care of the body as necessary as care of the soul, since matter is also a manifestation of God, and must not be considered as hostile or opposed to him. As Besht fought ascetics, so he fought the rigidity and sanctimony that had accreted to strict Talmudist viewpoints while not abrogating a single religious ceremony or observance. His target was the great importance which the Talmudist view attaches to the fulfillment of a law, while almost entirely disregarding sentiment or the growth of man's inner life. While the rabbis of his day considered the study of the Talmud as the most important religious activity, Besh laid all the stress on prayer. "All that I have achieved," he once remarked, "I have achieved not through study, but through prayer." Prayer, however, is not merely petitioning God to grant a request, nor even necessarily speaking to God, but rather, the glorious feeling of oneness with God Almighty. The state of the soul wherein a man or woman gives up their consciousness of separate existence, and join their own selves to the eternal being of God Supreme. Such a state produces indescribable bliss, which is the foremost fruit of the true worship of God.